Hello, everyone, and welcome to what promises to be a really exciting turbocharged session, which is pretty much every session that our guest conducts in his massive global reach and capacity. Jeremy Barr, welcome to PTH Venture Studio, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Jeremy holds and wears multiple hats. He is, of course, founding partner GP and CEO at Montelier Capital. So he understands the VC space extremely well. He's also the founder of the Super Founder Global Network and the Super Founder Global Advisory Council, which is a mentoring and advisory network with absolutely no parallel that I've come across. In complete transparency, I'm also part of both of those networks, and I'm very, very excited to be able to play a small part in what promises to be a massive undertaking. In addition, Jeremy is an advisor to PTH Venture Studio, and this is the capacity in which he has kindly consented to be here. Jeremy, I am super psyched for this session. What do you have in store for us? It's over to you.
Thank you, Omar. It's an honor, and I'm very grateful for you inviting me here to speak today. Let's talk about company science and people science today. How to kind of mathematically grow your companies and how you manage life fulfillment, how you measure things, etc. Before we start that, I will start by saying I have a personal life goal to go impact 3 billion people, crazy ambitious, impact half the planet, which means necessitates building the world's largest investor, founder, executive network. So we have a global founder, investor, executive network right now that we are building out. That is the Super Founder Global Network. And that is collateralized instead of just saying, let's go build that network and connect investors and founders, because there's other people now in the world doing that and doing that well. We are collateralizing that off of pulling those investors and founders together and executives together, collateralized on actually up-leveling CEOs and management teams with really rigorous, mathematically backed and experientially backed growth methods. Our goal is to grow people and companies faster than any other method on the planet. And that is what's collateralizing building out a global network as opposed to just connecting people. It's actually creating better CEOs, better companies, which then investors come to, and then also founders come for the investor capital, or if they're not on the investor track, they come purely to find out that they can grow the fastest possible, right? So we will optimize every single aspect from personalities and micro expressions and CTR rates and CVR rates and colors and words of landing pages and copy and every single thing. Every company is one big polynomial function. I write 4 billion variable functions that optimize the entirety of companies. I do it in my head and then mentor people with words is one option. The other option is we put it into Excel sheets. And then the other option is we actually put it into code. So if we start with when you start a company, right? If you want to look at how you start a company all the way up to $1 billion, $10 billion, right? How do we do picking of the product and service that we start with, right? And then grow up from there mathematically and efficiently, right? We want to start with what is your current skill set? Right? If we just come up with an idea, say 10 people in the room come up with an idea, they all have the same starting point, right? And so if your race is to get to 1 million to $1 billion, and there is a race because it's competitive against the market. When the customer is looking at your product or service on the shelf, on the LinkedIn shelf, on the retail store shelf, it is competitive. So we do have to put it in that lens. So when you are 10 different people coming up with an idea racing to 1 million, who has the leg up is the person who has the skill set, the deeper skill set in that idea, right? If I just come up with an idea, I have the same starting line as everyone else. But if I say, hey, based on my last 5 to 10 years of experience in XYZ thing, in engineering, in sales, in minerals, in whatever, in building and manufacturing things, I can use that last 5 to 10 years of experience of skill building as my starting point. Even though there's 10 other people in the room that have the same idea, I have a bigger starting point. That skill set creates your first initial seed of defensibility in your company. Defensibility means how you defend against competitors. It is what creates the price prop. When you create a price, your first pricing strategy, this is how you're starting your company, right? Like, what idea do I want to do? What products do I want to do? I shouldn't just come up with a random idea. I should do it based on a skill I have or a skill I will build over the next 3 months, 6 months. If AI just comes out and you want to build an AI company, you don't have skill in it yet, that's fine. You can go build that skill, but don't just come up with an idea and try to start releasing it yet. Build your skill. So build your company around a skill that you have or will build, right? That skill is the defensibility, which creates a price point, right? The more complicated, the more complex a product is, the higher the price point is. The higher the price point, AOV and LTV are those three things, right? So if I'm selling lemonade for $2, that's low defensibility because it's powder, water, and at a high level, right? And then there's a Tesla car, which has 1,500 car parts. There's a lot more features in there, and the number of features and the density of features and the supply demand of those features is what culminates mathematically into a defensibility point count number, right? And that creates your price point. So if you want to grow a large company, one way of doing it is saying, instead of selling a $100 product, I want to sell a $1,000 product or a $10,000 product, because $10,000 product times 1,000 customers versus selling a $100 product times the same number of customers, you actually grow, you can grow faster with a higher price point, but you have to account for the sales cycle of that, right? And so a lot of people, to start selling $1,000, $10,000 or higher products, some people are selling $500,000 products, you have a longer sales cycle. Instead of selling something in 24 hours because it's $50, you might have to wait 30 days, 60 days, sometimes up to 18 months before you can actually get your first sale. And so you don't want to be starting high price point products, say $5,000, $10,000 or $50,000 as your first company, unless you have the funding to manage your runway first. You also don't want to start your first company selling $30 or $20 products because you need so much volume of that, and you'd have to finance from investors or outside capital because the average CAC, customer acquisition cost for consumer goods, could be around $50. So if your product is below that, then you are unprofitable to start, and you actually have to get a certain amount of volume to get up, and then you have to start to increase your AOV, right? So if we just look at a high level of a company and we say, high level of a company, I want CAC to price point ratio 1 to 3, right? If I want a CAC of $100 and a price point of $300, then I have a 1 to 3. CAC to price point ratio is your fastest way of growing your company, because you can, every time you put $100 into customer acquisition, you make $300, and then from that $300 you can make $900, and you just flip, right? And at the higher levels, then that goes into $1 million equals $3 million, $100 million equals $300 million. You can see how that ratio affects your speed of growth, but you only get that ratio through increasing the complexity of your product based on your initial skill set, based on your initial seed of defensibility. Over time, as you grow your company, you will turn that seed of defensibility into a path of increasing defensibility. You'll use the profit from the last iteration to increase the difficulty or complexity of your product, to add more value to it, to then increase the price point, AOV, or LTV. So you have 3 different ratios: CAC to price point, CAC to AOV, and CAC to LTV. So with that, if you can get a 1 to 2, great. If you can get a 1 to 3, that's the most ideal. If you can get a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10, great. Every $100 you spend, you get 10, right? So then we want to look at iteration size. How fast can you actually flip that? If you go put $100,000 into a marketing machine and you're going to go get your 300,000 out, can you flip that in 30 days? Depending on your sales cycle, can you flip that in 30 days? Is it going to take you 6 months to flip? So iteration size and the ratio are your 2 speed factors. Now, if we go way earlier in that journey, right, instead of just saying we're going to flip 100 million for 300 million, 100K for 300K, let's go way earlier in the journey. A lot of people, when they're getting started on, before you can actually do paid ads where you can actually buy a CAC and buying a CAC is important because you need to be able to buy CAC. You need to be able to do things like paid ads to get yourself in front of your customer. When you're doing organic sales pre-paid ads, you are fighting for organic space, and organic space by LinkedIn and TikTok and all these other places are only giving you organic space based on how maybe divisive your content is, because that's going to create more discussion, more comments, more likes, more engagement, more time for people to see ads on that platform. So unless you're paying the platforms, you're not going to get visibility. And when you are doing an organic post, after you've done the A/B testing of your messaging to get your complex product really simple, which creates a nice CAC to LTV or CAC to price right ratio, once you've done that, you could post the greatest message today on one of those platforms and you get 1,000 impressions, maybe 5,000 impressions. And there could be 3,000 other customers that are ready to buy your product today. Once they see that particular message, they're ready and they have the money and they're ready to buy it. Those 3,000 customers that could make you $100,000 this month, but they won't see it. They're somewhere else on the other side of the planet, and they haven't seen it because the algorithm didn't give you that visibility. So you have to pay for that visibility, because organic, outside of getting viral, which is not a scalable way to grow a 5 to 10 year company. Viral doesn't matter. Chasing viral doesn't help. You want something reliable over 5 to 10 years. It's going to be the paid ads and your good messaging to keep your CAC low. Everybody has to be essentially, before you jump into paid ads, you want to do your organic ones well, right? And so that means putting your messaging out there, A/B testing to your ideal messaging, talking to your customers to get to your ideal messaging faster. And then when you're posting each day, you're changing only the insignificant parts. The significant parts, like I'm targeting CEOs or I'm targeting people that want to buy this kind of food, right? Who you're targeting, the number. You always want to have numbers in your post because that creates a defensibility of hooks, right? If everybody says they're selling lemonade, but somebody says they're selling a lemonade that gives you energy for 30 minutes, like there's a number in there. That's going to give you a differentiation and a defensibility, right? If somebody says it gives you energy for 30 minutes versus somebody else says their energy drink of lemonade gives you energy for 2 hours, you're now adding defensibility to the same exact thing of lemonade, right? You have a number in there, right? So we want numbers in there. And then if you say, oh, and we're selling it for $2 versus $20, that's going to be a different defensibility as well. And then if you also add in, oh, and 2 people love this, and you actually give quotes, that's helpful. But if you also say 50 people love us, that's also defensibility in your hook, right? So speeding up a company growth, a lot of people are trying to explain a complex product, and the speed of growth actually can come from how you make that one-liner that says, hey, we sell lemonade, or we sell a car that gets you from point A to point B, and I don't need to get into solution language or feature language. I stay in problem and desire language, which is, oh, with this car, you want to get from A to B, or you want this lemonade, you want something to quench your thirst, you stay in problem desire language. So you say it in one sentence, you put numbers, you put dates of when you can achieve this result with this product or service, whatever, and then you put some sort of price point. And a lot of your quickest growth is going to come from that, because that messaging right there in one line, very artfully and defensively created, numbers adding your defensibility to separate you from the customers, is what is going to drive your CAC down to give you a nice CAC to price point ratio. So once you have that, once you have the basic mechanics of, you first do a build step in a company and you A/B test your builds based on listening to the customer, because that's going to shorten your build time. And then you A/B test your messaging as a phase 2. And then you start to A/B test your sales calls. Then you start to get, you use that to get enough organic space, you get enough price point above your baseline bills, and then you start putting money into ads, and then you move into ads and you do use your ratio. Now you can grow your first $1 million company based on that alone, right? You start with your skill, you build something, you A/B test messaging, you then A/B test your sales, you get your first sales using the organic hooks and headlines, just posting daily with consistent hooks of the significant parts and only changing the insignificant parts, right? So we're still going to talk about lemonade, but maybe we're going to talk about lemonade, like how Red Bull will advertise. And it's not just Red Bull about energy drink, right? It's Red Bull for the biker. It's Red Bull for the skydiver. It's in these different contexts, right? So they're changing the insignificant parts while leaving the significant parts the same, right? So you use that in your organic, and then you get into paid ads, and then you scale up from there, and you go into a $1 million product, a $2 million product, $3 million product, right? And then you just do a simple formula for any function. If you want any company that has any company's product, you have one product line where you just say price point times repeat purchases times number of customers equals revenue for that year. It's a very simple 4-ish variable function where you can high level manage. Now, if you imagine a Google document, I release a lot of Google documents online. If you really imagine a Google document where you just have product 1, and it's this $1,000 price point times 2 repeat purchases times 10,000 customers, and you get some number like $2 million revenue, right? Then you copy paste that line into product 2. Now you have another product that's $100 or $500 or $10,000 times the repeat purchase rate times the number of customers that you're selling it to. Maybe it's some crossover, maybe it's some new ones, and then you have now a $5 million product. Now, if you want to look at what makes up a billion or a $10 billion company, it's a list of 10 to 100 different products, where each one of those products themselves, here's a $10 million product, here's a $5 million product, here's a $2 million product, here's a $500 million product. And so every company you can go into, and you can just, whether it's the $10 billion companies that exist today or somebody pre-revenue, you can just go in there, and at the highest level, you just look, how many products do you have? Is it 10? Is it 1? Is it 10? Is it 100? And you look at what's the price points, what's the repeat purchase rate, what's the number of customers, what's the revenue. That's your high level look at a company. Then when you dive into each product, you click into that and you look at the initiatives that you're going to need, the build initiatives, the A/B testing initiatives, the sales initiatives at a high level to create that function, to move yourself along the lines of that. And so when you are A/B testing your build, when you are A/B testing your messaging, when you are A/B testing your Sales calls, what we want to look at for optimizing those is your variables times your values. So in a particular hook, if I say I advise CEOs in a $2 million to $300 million range, and we grow them the fastest in the world, and these XYZ testimonials, people love us, right? There's like 4 different elements in a single sentence hook. And so as we're A/B testing through that to make it better and better, and this could be for lemonade, this could be for salsa, this could be selling a car, this could be selling AI, SaaS, clothing, food, farming. I advise on a lot of different companies that this is just a mathematical and people science and company science approach. Every company, 80% of your operations is company science, people science, and calculated decision making. Those 3 things. It's not actually all going to be about specific to that, the knowledge of that product, right? It is that's baked into messaging and baked into the product, but most of the way you're operating is based on company science, people science, and calculated decision making. So we want to stay in that. So when you are doing your build initiative, your A/B testing of your messaging, and then your sales, you are doing your variables times your values. And so if you have a 1-sentence hook that is the top of your messaging or in your sales call or a statement in your sales call, how you're going to be A/B testing through those is how efficiently you're going to grow. A lot of people, if you break up a hook into a 1-sentence hook, into whether it's on a sales call or messaging, into 4 different elements, that means there's 4 variables. Now, let's call the variable where I call out CEOs, let's call that a variable, and let's give it multiple values. I could use in my post or in my sales calls, I could call people CEOs. I could call them founders. I could call them $2 million operators. These are different values I get to try an A/B test through. Now, if I have these, let's say 3 variables in my headline hook, 1 sentence, we're optimizing 1 sentence. And we have those 3 variables, and we have 3 options for variable number 1, 3 different ways of calling out CEO, 3 different ways of calling out how we do it, 3 different ways of showing testimonials. We have a 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. 27 combinations of that headline hook. A lot of people, and if we're posting once a day, that means in 27 days, we will have tested all the combinations. That's how you do that math. 27 combinations, 1 post a day, 27 days. Now, if I'm doing 4 sales calls a day, then I can say 27 divided by 4, and now we're done in about 5 days on A/B testing that. So A/B testing is at a high level for efficiency of growth is about variable and value restriction, making those numbers smaller. The 3s and the 2s that we just talked about, where you go 3 times 3 times 3 is 9 times 27, right? To get to 27. Some people that haven't done that math, I see them A/B testing their hooks or their body copy or their landing pages or their sales calls or their build cycles, what features they're going to build. They're A/B testing, and they didn't restrict their value count of the variables to 3 or 2 or 4, right? As soon as you get to 4, you get very, very risky. There's people that haven't done the numbers, and then I go and do the numbers, and I see that they have 18 different ways that they could call out a CEO, 17 different ways that they could have done it, 15 different ways that they're doing the action of what they're doing. And when you do that number, you multiply 17 times 15 times 24 times 30, you get something like 15,000 combinations. And if you're doing 1 iteration a day, that means this is now going to take you 15,000 days to test 1 sentence because you didn't restrict the variable and value space of how you're messaging that. And if that's how long it's going to take you 15,000 days to test 1 hook of 1 post, what about A/B testing the rest of your body message? What about A/B testing all the questions and statements you're going to be saying in your sales calls? You're nowhere near going to be a successful company. And most people are stuck growing their companies right here, right there on the variables and values, not keeping the variables and values low. So we want to keep the variables and values low so that we can come up with numbers like 24 or 27, not 15,000. We want to come up with low numbers, and then we want to increase the number of times we get to try at that. So if we say that we're going to keep variables and values low for a sales call, okay, and that's going to be particularly hard on average because we just said for a post, you have 3 times 3 times 3 is 9, right? For 3 different elements of a hook. But what about a sales call? Even if you have 10 statements on a sales call, if you have 3 in there 10 times, you're looking at several thousand different combinations, which is why sales calls take a really long time. That's what increases the sales cycle, is that number of questions statement that increases with the product complexity, and you have your conversion ratios. So to shrink that down, we have to shrink down the variable value space, and then we also have to put a lot of volume in through that. So if we come up with 27 combinations, great. But if it's once a day, we get 27 days. If we can do 1 an hour, then we're done in 27 hours. So we shrink variables values to shrink the combinations, but then we have to shrink the iteration speed that we can do it. If I'm doing landing page tests on a small company website and I have 100 people coming in per day and I have a 5% conversion rate and I have 5 sales a day, and I want to wait 3 bucket tests. So that means 3 days to make sure that I hit on my new A/B test that I hit 8% 3 days in a row. That means I have to wait 3 days for 300 customers. But if I am a company, because I've done ads at $100,000 a day, if I am a company that's getting 100 a minute, then my test, instead of taking 3 days, is done in 3 minutes. 3 days to 3 minutes based on volume. Yes, that means bigger companies can afford more volume of more A/B tests and they get to grow much more efficiently, which means you efficiently want to get into those higher ratios faster, right? But you want to play with your volume. And so what people can do at lower scales, even when they're starting out, is say before paid ads, whatever. You don't want to go and optimize a landing page and A/B test a landing page when you have low volume to that page. You want to A/B test the content before they get to that page so that you can increase the volume that goes to the web page so that when you're A/B testing, the A/B testing is going to be much shorter. There are companies I've gone into where they're on an 18-month plan without even knowing it. And then we're able to change it to 72 hours before they get their result. By the way they're doing it, they're taking 18 months. And we just change up the variables and values and the test size iteration, the speed that you can actually do it, and you can do it in 72 hours. Do you want to be that company that's doing it in 72 hours? Do you want to be that company doing it in 18 months because you did or didn't do one line of math, which is 3 times 3 times 3 is 9, or 3 times 2 times 3, right? And keep them at 3s and 2s, right? So there's an order of steps that you need to do in a company, and it's going to be starting at the hook. You're A/B testing the hook, how you're hooking people first. What are those first 10 to 15 words? Optimize those first so that you can get a lot of volume into the next step, which is them reading your body copy of that post or of your landing page or whatever. For, let's say, body copy first. Then once you get enough A/B testing on the body copy to where lots of people are going to your landing page, then you can start A/B testing your landing page because now you have enough volume to put through that. Then from the landing page, if it happens to lead to a sales call instead of a right away click, depending on your price point, you then are going to be optimizing your sales call. And within your sales call, you're not going to be A/B testing your price point and your closings, which are the lowest conversion rate question statement areas of your sales call. You're going to be doing the first A/B testing of your first statements. When you get on a call and you're just like, hey, how's your day going? You gotta be checking eye movement, body language, tone of voice, and microexpressions on the first statements to measure your statement by statement conversion rate. And you have to be optimizing those ones first before you start optimizing the next ones. Because again, it's about the volume going through the top ones. You have to get the volume through the top ones before you can actually play with the A/B testing of the volume of the secondary ones down below. Once you get to a conversion rate that is at 80%, at least up to 80% of a standard CVR rate or of an industry rate CVR rate of a sales call, for example, if you're at 15% or 20%. Once you get to 80% of that, then you can work on upsells. If you work on same call upsells before you reach an 80% conversion rate, that means you're still working on 80% of the standard industry conversion rate, right? If standard industry conversion rate is 10% or 15% or 20%, depending on the product, depending on the service, depending on the industry, then you'd be 80% of the 10%, 80% of the 15%, right? Once you get to that, then you can do your upsell same call if you wanted to. If you did an upsell same call before you got to 80%, then you're affecting and making your initial conversion rate fail. You're losing out on your feedback loop because now I don't know if they didn't convert on the first product or if I didn't convert because they didn't want the upsell with it as well, right? So we have to do these things in stages, and then mathematically move from there. So if you want to have takeaways, it's start with your high level calculations and then zoom into your buckets, right? If you look at a company that has 10 different products, one that's $1 million, one that's $100,000, and one that's $10 million, your biggest mover is obviously the $10 million, but so many people aren't diving into the buckets in that way. And then in that product, so you want to have this way of zoom out, look at your products, look at the highest profitable products to move levers there first, at least. Obviously, there's nuances of why we'd play with the other ones at some point in time. You start with that lever. Once you figure out the highest profitable product, then you jump into those 3 variables that we talked about where we go price point times retention number times customer number. And we say, which one of those 3 buckets do we want to move into? Which one of those 3 buckets is the best return on my time, energy, and capital to move the needle, right? If I take a $1,000 price point, 1 repeat purchase, 10,000 customers, and we get to $1 million in revenue, what if we just said change it to 2 repeat purchases? Now it's a $2 million revenue company, right? I don't know if I did that 2 million or 20 million in my head, right? But $1,000 price point times the 1 repeat purchase times 10,000 customers, right? So, and all we did was change repeat purchases from 1 to 2. So then we ask ourselves, what is the effort, time, energy, capital that it would take to look at all my 10,000 customers or all the ones inbound and say, I want to get them, instead of just buying once, I want to get them to buy twice. What is the time, energy, and capital it would take to do that, right? And we might come up with a number, $10,000 in 60 days. Okay, but if it's going to make us an extra $1 million, then that is a $10,000 to $1 million, because $1 million is the net new. $10,000 to $1 million, that's a ratio of how quality your decision is. So you want to have decision quality, and you can calculate decision quality. The other option is look at the other bucket and say, instead of increasing one repeat purchase to two repeat purchases, we are going to look and say, price point, instead of being $1,000, let's talk about increasing that to $2,000, because that would give me the same $2 million, right? Just like increasing one repeat purchases to two gave me the 1 million to 2 million. Same thing. If we leave that at one repeat purchase and we just say change price point from 1,000 to 2,000, we now have $2 million. But then you have to ask yourself, what does it cost in terms of time, energy, and capital to actually increase the price from 1,000 to 2,000? If you happen to get lucky and your customers can afford the $2,000 and it's nominal price for them, you can change it instantly and you're good, but that's most likely not the case. To change the price point, you would need to increase your displayed authority. Are you worth selling that for $2,000? Do I believe you at that price point? There's a very different authority level. And so now authority / expertise level. So what amount of time, energy, and capital would it take for you to go and earn that authority level or that displayed authority level? And there's a very big difference between the authority and expertise you have and the authority and expertise that is perceived by the customer in front of you that allows you to charge a $2,000 price point. The other thing about driving up price point you could look at in terms of time, energy, capital, cost is saying, well, we're talking about software, or we're talking about food, or we're talking about this kind of manufacturing product. If we add 3 or 4 different features in software or in the manufacturing process to increase the price to $2,000, what is the time, energy, capital of that? Is it 90 days and $40,000? Okay, so 90 days and $40,000 to get us that 1 million. So now we have an option of $40,000 gets us $1 million, or the other option was $10,000 gets us $1 million. Well, clearly $10,000, spending $10,000 to get $1 million is a better ratio than spending $40,000 in 90 days to get $1 million, right? So you have these ratios, and all you're doing is quick 30 to 60-second bucket level analysis that doesn't take complicated math. You can break out any company, the biggest companies in the world. Cool, if they have 100 products or 1,000 products, you can sort them in an Excel sheet or in a code sheet. You figure out the highest revenue at a high level. This is all high level basics. You just find the highest level revenue. And that's, you already zoomed in from 100 or 500 products. You found the top revenue driving product. That's your first bucket analysis. And then your second zoom in is it repeat purchases? Is it price point? Or is it increasing customer account? Increasing customer account is your SDRs, is your AEs, is your CTRs, is your CDRs, is your variables and values of hooks and of landing pages. And you can only increase CTRs and CDRs up to a cap. Once you increase it to the cap, your most long-term growth areas is in your price point, your AOV, and your LTV. Then now you're looking at more products. Now you're looking at retention rates, et cetera. Right? So you have these click-in areas where you can dive into a certain area. I know we are at 38 minutes and we had 90 minutes. I just want to be reminded, Omar, what is did we want to leave space for QA, or I can keep talking too? I know you're finding your sound. That's fine. I have a couple other bullet points that I can cover too, but I just want to check in with how much time I'm supposed to leave. Well, you get to that. The other thing we could talk about is, I just don't want to go into Q&A. I know we have plenty of time, so I'll keep talking. How do you master life fulfillment, and how do you look at personal narrative mastery? So the next thing you want to look at is, if you have the basics of company's growth and company science, when you're growing your company, you're going to have to learn to manage people. That's later stage, like getting up to 1 million, getting up to 500,000. Maybe you can do it on your own, depending on your price point. If it's $5,000 or $10,000 products, and you have that defensibility there, and you can wait out the sales cycle there. Then you get up to 300,000, 500,000 without a team, but then you need to start handling a team, right? And then you get into this process where you have to learn to delegate your time, and there's a whole process around that. But we want to learn to start managing people. How do you interview well? How do you hire well? Because you might have managed how to do all of the operations solo, but how do you then teach that to a sales team of 2 people, 5 people, and then eventually 300 people if you're on the path of growing large, right? How do you train the engineers to do those same calculated decision makings for a priority framework? How do you do that for all the engineers and having your VP and CTO and people like that teach, right? If you're a CEO, teaching your CTO or VP of engineering, right? There's a lot of skilled people in the world, but not all of them are making calculated decisions to this level. So even the stuff I'm talking about is not standard practice, and it should be standard practice. And our job, my focus is going out there and making it standard practice. But you're going to find high skilled people in the world that are good at engineering, that are good at skills, that are not good at the people science, managing people, or making calculated decisions. And so this is something you will want to share the lens and perspective with them as well. We never want to tell people what to do. We always want to share a lens and perspective. That is the ideal management. That is also the ideal peer-to-peer working relationship of, hey, here's a lens or perspective I have. What are your thoughts? Always just memorizing that. Here's a lens or perspective I have. What are your thoughts, right? So you want to get good at that. And just like hiring, just like doing sales calls, and just like is the same as managing people. And we start in both of those by asking about the other person. We don't sell our company or sell our task initiative to the employees and say, hey, I want you to go do this, I need you to go do this. We ask them in the interview and through one-on-ones, what do you want with your life? Why are you joining here? What are your goals for your life as an employee? And what can we help you get out of here in terms of skill set, in terms of money, in terms of vacation times, in terms of even hopping you to the next job in 18 to 24 months if you want. Like, transparency is a lot more valuable than imagining that you're going to keep that employee for 5 or 10 years. That's nice. And especially if you're in management or co-founder, you're going to keep people longer and you want to keep people longer. But ICs, to expect that is not realistic when the average turnover is going to be around 18 months, right? So at least be open and transparent with where they want to go, service what they want while they're here, and you get more loyalty, you get more productivity, et cetera. So learning to manage people is about learning what they want in their life over the next 2, 5, 10 years, in what quantification, what timeline, what word precision they want. I call it WPND, word precision, numbers, and dates. The top 1% of people in the world, the most successful people in the world, have word precision, numbers, and dates. You want to use it for yourself, and you also want to look for this in interviews. 99% of people aren't going to have it. So what you're looking for is, to what degree do they have it or not have it? And how many weeks or months would it take me to get them to a better level of WPND, word precision, numbers, and dates? So in the interviews, while you're trying to build a team, while you're trying to manage one-on-ones better, you want to look for, how do I increase word precision, numbers, and dates with people? If somebody says, like, here's how we're going to make a customer happy, what does happy mean? Because happy is a general abstract word. And we want to turn it into, well, what makes a customer happy? One customer could be happy with a refund. Another customer could be happy with a discount. Okay, so now we've increased word precision. Well, what about adding a number? Well, if somebody wants a discount and we have word precision there, we want to say, well, what's the number about it? One customer might want a 10% discount. Another one might want a 30% discount. As we add numbers, that increases success with making that person happy, right? As opposed to just saying, hey, the job of our company today is to make customers happy. Okay, that's not going to be helpful in running a company unless you can get word precision on, what does that customer want? Is it a refund or a discount? And if it's a discount, is it 10% or 30%? Then you want to add, as part of WPND, word precision, numbers, and dates, you want to add a date. When do they get that discount? When do they get that refund? Is it in the next 90 seconds after we finish this sales call with the customer service team? Is it in 2 minutes? Is it in 5 minutes? Is it in a day? Is it in 14 days? Word precisions, numbers, and dates is something you want to look for in interviews, in one-on-ones, and wherever they are with their level of WPND skill, you want to increase that WPND skill, okay? Once you look at matching employees' life plans with your company's plan for the duration that they're staying, and you understand the basic human template, which is important for sales calls and managing teams, is understanding a basic human template and the variety of humans. Then you want to be able to look at, okay, say you're managing a successful company already now with all of this, and 80% of them fail, but say you're doing all of this, which most people aren't doing. You say you're doing all this and your company's running well. You want to make sure, am I working 40 hours a week or 80 hours a week, or am I working 30 hours a week? Am I going to make a sustainable 5, 10-year run, company run, right? So we look and we say, well, I'd love to be able to work 30 or 40 hours a week and maybe not 50, 60, 70. I ideally recommend like a 30 or 40. Obviously, you're passionate and you probably want to work more than a lot of you, but you still want to be able to build a life, go travel, build a family, whatever you want to do, right? Activities, whatever. You want to build a sustainable life. So we look at that with the perspective of priorities. And it's said easily, but let's use the calculations we said before, right? If we're using to prioritize our time, instead of working 60 hours a week, we're going to look at every single hour block and say, what's the highest ROI hour? We're simply going to look at what we said before. You dive into the product that is a high revenue one or a high profit one. These are just basic high level ways of looking at it. There's a lot more sophisticated ways that we can talk about. But you'd say, let me pick the highest revenue or the highest profit or the highest profit times volume one. Okay. You pick that first bucket and then you dive into the bucket of like, is it retention? Is it price point? Is it customer count? And then you dive into another bucket below there. This is how you prioritize your time. It's through that calculated decision making. It's through that funnel that we already talked about. That's how we prioritize our time. So anytime you're working 60-hour weeks, write down 60 one-hour blocks that you spent your time on and calculate the ROI. Which bucket was it from? And for one company, the bucket of customer retention is going to be way more profitable for them. But for another company, changing price points is going to be way more profitable for them. Do not take advice that worked for another company. I don't care if this person made $100 million or $1 billion. Do not take advice from another company that worked until you calculate it for you and show that with your personality, your messaging, your product volume, you can do it. There is a scenario that I've had to do at $50 million company, which is a great example I love to use, is where you have this concept that says, let's go increase the speed of our web page so that instead of loading in 2 or 3 seconds, it loads in 500 milliseconds. Because if we speed up the web page, we will increase the conversion rate from 2% to 3 or 4%, right? Now, if we apply that concept, most people are failing in the world because they are applying concepts and abstract words and not doing word precision, numbers, and dates. They're doing abstract words and concepts, and they're not doing WPND, right? So if we take that concept of speeding up a web page to increase CVR, which decreases CAC, which increases revenue and profitability, you then say, okay, well, we had 30 different web pages. And it's going to take 20 hours of development time to change up the JavaScript, to change up the code, to change up the CSS and images, to speed up that web page from the 2 to 3 seconds to the 500 milliseconds, okay? 20 hours per web page times 30 web pages. You're looking at a 6-month initiative to speed up all of them. But if we look at each web page and each one is a landing page for a product, and we have one product that's making us $1 million, another one's that making $5 million, and another one and a lot of other ones that are making $100,000, $200,000, then it's much more profitable for us to go and only fix the speed on the highest volume product pages where you're making $1 million, $2 million. That way, when you make that 2 to 3% conversion rate boost and you're making an extra several $100,000 off of 20 hours of work, now you say developer time times 20 hours of work. Cool, this was a $5,000 task to make $200,000 versus doing all the web pages. And even and then on the lowest page, you spent $5,000 or $10,000 to speed up that web page, but you only made 30,000, which is a 1-to-3 ratio, which is 1 to 3 is like your minimum because that doesn't even count for company margins, right? And as far as opportunity cost of the time, you're missing out on the 1 to 100 ratio instead of the 1 to 3 ratio that you just chose. So there's very simple calculations there. So how you want to look at your life fulfillment in terms of like, do I have time to spend on the weekends is your 60-hour work week, break it into 61-hour blocks. Do the calculation of which product bucket, retention bucket, et cetera, is this in, and really quickly move from there. You can grow a billion-dollar company and work 10 hours a week in theory and in application if you do it right. Because as you grow, your time first is worth $50 an hour, then it's worth $500 an hour versus, right? The same CEO that's working 2,080 hours in a year at 40 hours a week, if they're a $1 million company, their dollar per hour is some amount, right? Same hours next year, but now obviously you won't grow to a $10 million company over in the next year, but say it's a $10 million company. Now that dollar per hour rate is 10 times higher. And then it's 100 times higher when you're at a $1 billion company. The same CEO at a $1 billion company and a $1 million company has the same exact 20-80 hours in a year for 40-hour working weeks. The same exact number of hours. But one person's dollar per hour is a lot more profitable. And it comes purely through the prioritization mechanism that you choose to use. And the prioritization mechanism that you choose to use must come from that high-level bucket that we talked about of products and then dive into the buckets from there. And that product line bucket comes from your defensibility of your initial skill set. So when you're looking at how can I build the greatest company for me, you start at what skill do I have from the last 5 to 10 years, or what skill will I build over the next 6 months to 1 year so that I can be better than anyone else on the planet. If you want to go out there and build an average company and say, I just want to go build a $200,000 a year, $500,000 a year company, fine. But it's actually a lot more work to build a small $200,000, $500,000 a year company than it is to build a $1 million or $5 million or $50 million company. It is harder with more complexity of managing people science, but when you get really good at people science, each skill is an asset. Once you get really good at people science, you can manage 2 people, 5 people, 500 people. Once you get good at the asset of managing ambitious people, which is your managers more so than the ICs, That's also an asset. So yes, it is harder to manage people and there's more different complexities, but you get these asset skills that make those larger ranges better. But what's actually harder to maintain is the defensibility of how you appear to the customer on the retail store shelf or in the LinkedIn shelf. And that comes from your pure ability to be the best in the world at that thing. Because the customer, when they're looking at your product or service on the shelf of a LinkedIn post or of a retail store shelf or of a billboard, they don't care about your people science or your managing teams of people skill. They're only looking at you next to the other product. And that says, are you the best in the world to solve my problem right now? And that's the defensibility that keeps your product sustainable over time. Otherwise, you launch $1 million product, another company comes in, launches the same $1 million product, compresses your margins down, you're not efficient, and then you go out of business. Or you lose out on that product and you better have had another product up by that point. So your ability to be the best in the world at something is what drives the defensibility of that price point and drives defensibility against the competitors. And to be able to build a skill set that says, I'm the best in the world at X, you want to find a team and or be the person, the founder, the CEO that is able to build long-term skills, that is able to build deep skills that drive that defensibility. And so what does it take to build a massive skill set? It's going to take a lot of focus. So now we're looking at, can you manage your dopamine? Or are you busy scrolling on social media? Are you getting distracted with you enjoy in the beginning stages of your company, you're enjoying the weekends a lot and you have dopamine loops there? Because if you have dopamine loops that can distract you every hour to scroll social media, to relax, to go have fun all the time on the weekend, right? Then you aren't having the dopamine loops needed to drive a lot of focus, which drives learning a massive skill better than everyone else, which drives the defensibility of the price point, the AOV, the LTV. And if you don't practice taking all that complexity and talking easily and quickly and efficiently to customers in brief format in their problem and desire language and not your mastered solution language, then you don't get a nice CAC to price point ratio. Every single thing about your life and how you scroll on social media drives into a CAC to price point ratio. You can then look at somebody when you want to invest in them. You can actually look at somebody in an interview and look at how they spend their time and their energy and how they make their decisions. And you will know how good of a hire they will be or how good of a founder they will be on a particular journey based on how their current habits are today. And you can look at yourself in the same lens, based on your dopamine loop distractions, based on how you spend your time, based on how much focus you have, based on how much interest you have in a particular area. Are you creating a nice CAC to price point ratio, right? So this is what we talked about today so far is talking about how you mathematically build to a $1 billion, $10 billion company, how you manage time management, how you dive into buckets of what you're going to optimize when there's 100 different things or 1,000 different things you can do at any given time. What is the one thing that's most profitable for you to dive into for the next hour? And there's always a one most profitable thing for you, particularly for each employee, for each personality, right? And you don't have to overwork yourself. You can high level plan these things with quick math. Once you learn how to do it, takes an hour, you know how to build a $1 billion company and whether it's going to be viable for you or not based on your desire for a 5 to 10 year journey to look at a certain number of hours and a certain number of skills that you need to build. And then you proceed there very mathematically, variables times values, every single hook, every single message. You can math out exactly how many days it would take you to get through the A/B testing matrix of something on the messaging, on the build, etc. And then you can say, is this viable? Is this feasible for me or not? Most people in the world aren't doing the quick calculations. And so they're on an 18,000 combination journey and they don't even know it. They're hoping for the sale every single day. And they're on an 18,000 combination journey. And all they had to do was 5 minutes, once they're good at it, 5 minutes, but maybe your first time an hour, 5 minutes to an hour of calculations to save yourself from being on an 18,000 day journey. And then because that day is so long, you're trying to stress to get your first sale. Now you're working 60, 70-hour weeks because you didn't have a prioritization metrics. And now you're getting burnout and then you don't want to run a company anymore. And then you go end up working for another company again, where now you have a boss again. And now you're not an entrepreneur anymore because you didn't do a 5 minute 5 minute to 60-minute calculation. So if you do these 5 minute to 60-minute calculations, you can actually make sure you're on the path you want to be on. And that way, when you're waiting for a sales cycle to pay off, you know exactly how long it's going to take. You know what you're putting effort in the right direction. Growing a company, growing yourself is always going to be massive effort. You just want to make sure it's in the right direction, not figuring out after 6 months or 2 years that you were doing it in the wrong direction and all you had to do was a 60-second calculation. So that, I think, covers all the topics I was going to talk about. Life fulfillment, personal narrative mastery, personal. The other thing, actually, the last thing I had on my bullet point list is we still have 30 minutes left, so maybe 10 minutes, 5, 10 minutes talk about this, and then maybe we can do some Q&A. And maybe we'll end it up short just because I always talk fast. So personal narrative mastery. We live in a multi-world. So a lot of people think we live in some absolute world, but how do we actually form when we're talking to each other, when we're doing sales calls, when we're managing people, when we're building relationships, significant other, friend, investors, whatever, when building relationships, we're using words, we're exchanging words, microexpressions, eye movements, all of this is communication to another person. But we don't have definitions of words stored in our head like a dictionary. Sound travel, this is like one of the most important things you can learn in your life, is that sound travels into your ear, hits your eardrum, hits a chain of bones, which then hits a pressure-like window, which moves sound waves across a fluid to 20,000 hair-like cells to 6,000 hair-like cells, and then turns it into electrical pulses, which combines with electrical pulses from your feeling sensory, your smell, your sight, and your taste. This is how words go into your brain. So when you hear the word potato and you taste it and you smell it, all of that is defined. When somebody is running at you with their hand up, that might get you into fight or flight motion, whether they are excited or whether they're coming to fight you, right? This is the way our brains store information. Electrical pulses, not these same words. So when we have miscommunications, we have to think, how did that word done, the project is done by a designer, probably means the design was done, but not the programming was done. Done by a programmer, when the programmer says it's done based on engineering requirements, but not based on business requirements or customer requirements necessarily. So we all have these different definitions of done. We all have these different definitions of potato. You know what? Like I had a really good potato, I had really good food, I had really good steak, and somebody else had a horrible experience, right? And so when we're communicating these things, what does love mean? What does happy mean? Is it a discount? Is it a refund? What do all these different words mean when we're doing teamwork, when we're doing sales? We have to look at it from a perspective of the multi-world thesis. We don't live in an absolute world where words all mean the same, or where micro-expressions or eye movements all mean the same. Somebody's half 5 centimeter, 15 centimeter smile could mean sarcasm. Somebody else's 15 centimeter, same smile size, could mean, I really like this idea. Somebody else, that could be kind of a boring idea compared to like what would get them really excited, right? But it's the same exact thing, right? We live in a multi-world thesis on how we can hear and communicate from other people, reading them, listening to them, and how we communicate out. And so if it's a sales call, if it's talking to an employee, if it's talking to a friend, a significant other, a partner, an investor, anyone, the first thing we want to do is say, forget about me, forget about my product, my service, anything I think, forget even about the words that I'm trying to say. Let me first ask somebody questions about them, about their life, about what they care about, and start to write down in your head what words are they using, how do they form concepts, what weight do they put to different words, so that when you talk your very first sentence to somebody else in a sales call with an employee, with a partner, with anyone, you are going to state what you want to say to that person using their words, because that's what's going to mean something to them. Communication is done well when the other person understands. If you say words all day long based on what you're thinking in your head, and you're like, this is so clear, I'm saying X, Y, Z. Well, you said done, but they didn't understand what done meant to them. It was different. You said make somebody happy, but they understood happy to be different. Every single word you say is completely different to the other person. So one of the biggest things we have to do in every single conversation with everyone is understand, what do those words mean to them and how are they receiving, right? If some people will receive communication from you more in your microexpressions, your body language, your tone of voice than words. I've talked to some people where they will completely ignore the words, and based on your tone of voice, angry, happy, slight, scared, whatever, they're taking some other vibe, right? When you're on a sales call, when you're talking to an employee, like if you're coming off timid or if you're coming off confident, these are obvious ones, but there's so many unobvious ones, right? You could have said, I said all the same things that the sales trainer told me to do, or that the relationship person told me to do for building out relationships, for networking, for et cetera, right? I said all the right words. Well, your micro expressions were kind of awkward. Your eye movement was all over the place. You made this person feel awkward. And consciously or unconsciously, that person was just like, I got to stay away. A lot of times it's unconsciously. It takes 500 milliseconds for our unconscious brain to process before we get to the conscious layer. A lot of people's reactions are going to be based on their unconscious, which is coming from all their experience of how they experienced that particular tone of voice from somebody else. So your tone of voice could be firm and aggressive, but that could also make somebody else feel insecure or unsafe. And you were just saying one thing passionately, but you made somebody else feel unsafe. So we have to be able to understand how is that person's world constructed from a word level, but also very much from a sensory level, and understand like what t-shirt color am I wearing? What body language am I giving off? What context is the background that I'm in? And how is that conveying to somebody consciously or unconsciously? A lot of it's going to be unconsciously, but you have to be aware of those. And that's part of your A/B testing as you're managing employees. That's part of your A/B testing as you're doing sales calls is, you know what? I didn't change the words on any of my scripts today. All I did was change tone of voice today. The next day, all I did was change, and we're doing variables and values of the different tone of voice inflections. Okay, so now we have 5 different tone of voice inflections that we're going to test, and we're going to test it with the different word intersections. And now we have 5 days of tests just based on tone of voice alone, right? And then we're going to do another set of tests for 12 days or 24 days based on microexpressions alone. Now I'm going to hold my tone of voice consistent with what I was doing with what's been working so far. And I'm going to keep my words the same, but now I'm going to test with my microexpressions, because just by changing my microexpressions, I might make that relationship better. I might make that sale better, etc. So understanding the multi-world thesis is something that will help significant other relationships, friendships, investor relationships, sales calls, employee calls, way more than just having the right way you think about it in your brain or having the right company strategy. Now I think that covers all my bullet points that I was going to talk about.
Amazing, Jeremy. Amazing. I'm gonna have to cut this video up into probably 50 1 to 2 minute videos just to allow digestibility, because you've downloaded such a powerful operating system that I think we really need to break it down for our viewers and for our listeners and for our founders.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, earlier I was having some technical issues, so I'm now actually logged in on multiple screens, because I have audio in one screen and I have video in another screen, and it's just I apologize for not being able to answer your question earlier. So we have Zafar here with us. Zafar, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask Jeremy? Zafar, I think he's on.
Hi, Jeremy. Uh, is my
Please.
voice audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you, Zafar.
Yeah, I just joined Jeremy in the mid of his lecture or his the presentation. So I was just asking, what is the concept between 5 minutes and 60 minutes? What he want to like explain for the focus of any task.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Did you get me? Actually, I want
I didn't hear it comprehensive enough. I heard some of it. So I think if you repeat it, I can probably get it.
I just asking that I want to know the relationship between 5 minutes and 60 minutes for focusing any specific task to
Oh,
like
he's asking
to
about, you were talking about it takes 5
focus.
to 60 minutes to come up with calculation. So maybe you could recap that thought process.
Yeah, yeah. So the way of prioritizing in that 5 minute to 60 minute process is, say you have 5 products, for example. It could be 500, but say you have 5 products. One is $100,000 product. One is a $1 million product, and the other ones are $300,000 products, right? So you have 100,000, a million, 300,000, 300,000, 300,000, right? If we want to say what's the highest lever way at a high level to grow, we would jump into the highest number, the $1 million product bucket, right? Because if we put time and energy into any of the other product buckets on their landing pages, and we put an equivalent amount of energy, because it's going to take the same amount of time to speed up a web page, for example, on any one of those products, 20 hours, okay? 20 hours of dev hours to speed up a web page or to improve a sales call, depending on the complexity of the product. Let's not talk about that, but speeding up a web page, right? If it's the same 20 hours in, then we want to do that on the revenue bucket that is the highest, right? So we look at that $1 million. So that's our first kind of dive in, is just breaking out those 5 products, seeing the $100,000 one, a $1 million one, 300,000, 300,000, 300,000. We dive into the $1 million product. Now we're not trying to optimize the other lower revenue buckets. Then from there, we dive into one of 3 high-level areas. There's so many hundreds of areas, but 3 high-level areas is 1, price point. Do we want to increase the price point there? Do we want to change the repeat purchases, and or do we want to try and increase the customer count? So now we have 3 other buckets to pick into. So when you do this, this decision-making criteria here is based on how Google search does red, black, binary search trees. It's just having the problem each time. And in this case, because there's multiple options, it more than halves it each time. So this is why it's a 5-minute to 60-minute process, is because it can take you 10 seconds to look, or 3 seconds to look at 5 products and know which one you're diving into, okay? 3 seconds to dive into the first product. Now you have 3 more seconds to dive into one of those products, into one of those buckets of price point, this or that. Intuitively, you know how much effort. You can take extra time to analyze the effort, but intuitively, you know a little bit within 3 seconds. Oh, it would take me a lot of effort to increase the price point, or it would take me this amount of effort to increase the repeat purchases, or this amount of effort to increase the customer account, because you know what, it's hard to find customers, or it's hard to increase the CVR. Maybe we're already at the CVR cap, so we can't even touch that one anymore, right? So that's our second dive in that we're doing in 3 seconds. So 6 seconds in, we have 2 massive dive ins in 2 buckets. And then within that, now if we are increasing price point, we then ask ourselves, okay, if I'm going to increase price point based on feature, because that's one way of increasing price point, is adding a high value feature that makes it worth more. Then we just say, okay, now if there's 5 features that I could build, what is the value of each of those 5 features? Ask myself that question over in a 5 to 10 second interval, and say, the value of that one, based on what the customers have said, is worth an extra $50 a month. This one is worth $100. This one is worth $500. Okay, let's choose the $500 one at a high level, right? Not always choosing the highest one, because it could be a lot longer effort, but let's just say high level, $500. Okay, now we're in our third dive in, 3 to 5 seconds for each one. So it's called 5, 5, 5. 15 seconds in, we're at our third dive in now on feature price point. And then we look at the effort, and we say, what is the effort it's going to take to increase the price point, to actually add that feature to then get that $200 price point? And we say it's 20 hours of dev work. Cool. Within 15 seconds, we now know, go do that task. We didn't have to look at web pages. We didn't have to analyze the effort of web page on product 4, because we didn't even dive into that bucket at all. Because of this diving into buckets, the speed of diving into buckets like that is how we do this quickly. And so I'm saying it's done quickly, like once you know what you're doing. The first time you look at this for your company, it might take you some time to list out your products, the number of customers, the retention rate, the price point, okay? It might take you some time then to dive into what feature options could I do? What methods could I do to increase repeat purchase rate? Does it mean I just add an upsell and say, hey, do you want to buy a second purchase? Does it mean I add an email sequence that says, hey, you bought 1 protein, do you want to buy the second protein 30 days later? And it's only an email sequence? That takes 2 hours to send out an email to suggest them to buy the second one. That's a low cost effort way to increase repeat purchases. And if you happen to get 100% retention rate, repeat purchase rate, then you now go from a $1 million company to $2 million company by spending 2 hours on sending an email. So again, with this, like once you kind of write out all those options at a high level, for the next year, it's only going to be 30 seconds to look at which bucket do you want to do next. And then you just look at now what's the order of buckets. Now that you have bucket effort, cost and value for each bucket, you then say, cool, we're going to do that bucket first, then that bucket, then that bucket. Now we have an order of buckets, and we have our next 20 buckets, and we know that this one's a 1 weeker, this one's a 2 weeker, this one's a 3 weeker, and we have company order defensibility all created. Once you've created that initial part and you just create the order defensibility because you have the numbers created, you now have a 30-minute exercise where you have order defensibility on your most efficient way to grow.
Amazing.
Okay.
So, for the last 1 hour, Jeremy, I have been smiling continuously, and I've been trying to hide it because one of the things that I've been teaching my students for, I don't know, over a decade now, every time I've taught a brand management course or a creativity course or one of these marketing courses, I've introduced an equation that is called the PFA equation, right? So penetration, frequency, amount. And if you multiply penetration by frequency and multiply that by amount, you get the total output or the total value of the company. So penetration is how many people are buying the product, frequency is how often they're buying it, and amount is how much they use every time they consume the product. So this is why I was smiling, because it's exactly the same science. It's exactly the same process. And I've had people come up to me and say, oh, the PFA doesn't apply in my company. And I'm like, yeah, really? Let's do that. And then you do the math and they're like, holy shit, I never thought of it that way. So what you're basically doing is taking that math and breaking it down to the lowest common denominator of operations of a company and really re-gearing the entire OS of the company to focus on one of these three major areas. And it's phenomenal. I am like I said, I'm going to break this video down into lots and lots of little pieces because people really need to understand this. It's so powerful and so compelling. And the way you talked us through this entire process has been fantastic. So, Jeremy, I'm conscious we've used up an hour and a quarter. I do want to ask you one question though before you go. For a lot of people, numbers science around a company is not intuitive, right? Because they've grown up with this model of the brilliant, charismatic Steve Jobs / Elon Musk type who's just out there and just throwing shit at a wall, and some of his shit is super successful and other nobody really notices the other stuff, right? But what you're talking about is a fundamentally different way of approaching business, right? So how do we make people comfortable so that they can actually de-stress, so that they can take out some of the uncertainty of what it is to be an entrepreneur? So how do we get this across to people?
Yeah. So it's easier to do it when I'm with somebody and I write out their numbers. But if we look and say, first identify what is that goal that we want. Is it $500,000 a year kind of salary and being an entrepreneur at that level? And do I want to be more comfortable 200,000, 500,000, or do I want to get into millions or billions, right? Identifying what you really, really want is the important first step so that we can create a product and price point around that life journey that you want, right? And so we have this ending or journey / ending point of like, here's a revenue target that we're targeting, or here's a life journey of like a massive size that I want, 200,000 or a billion, right? We kind of start with that. And then we start, and then the other second piece we start with is like, what's your current skill set or the one that you really, really passionately want to build? And then we just do the numbers that we talked about in this video, where you say, okay, based on this skill set, in the marketplace, this is worth a $100 price point. Or in the marketplace, this is worth a $1,000 price point. And then we just do that quick math of, if I do a $1,000 price point times this repeat purchase rate based on what I think they might repeat purchase by, whether it's 1 time or 5 times, whatever. Above 3 is going to be just harder depending on who you are and depending on what the product is. And then times the number of customers. And we say, okay, customers over what time span? 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, divided by years, divided by months. Now you know how many sales you need to get per day. Is it 15? Is it 27? And then if you say times by a 5% conversion rate, I know this is like hard for people to conceptualize as I'm wording it, but like if you're writing it down, it's only 5 or 6 numbers. And when you're for you, it makes it a lot easier. So you say, okay, so if I need like 10 customers a day to fulfill, the whole annual goal and whatever, and with my price point, then we're saying, okay, based on a 5% conversion rate web page, you need, let's say 300 visitors, 500 visitors on your web page, and then if you have a 2% conversion rate, now you need 10 or 20,000 impressions per day. And then you ask yourself, can I get 10 or 20,000 organic impressions a day eventually, or do I need to get in paid ads? How long can I push those organics? And then you look at it and you just see a couple variables, right? Your price point times your number of customers that you needed equals your revenue target that you wanted. You're like, cool, that's my revenue target, very easy, visible. And my price point was based on my current skill set that I'm passionate about, or that I'm building even more, and I'm passionate to build that over the next 6 months to worthy that price point, right? So we're only at 3 variables. And then we're just saying number of customers per month because we divided by 12 months, and then divide by 30 days for days. And you times by conversion rate of your landing page or of your sales call. Is that feasible? Is that doable? And then the number of impressions that you need to hook on. Is that viable for you? If not, change one of those variables. You know what? Maybe I don't need that many customers. Maybe I don't need that much revenue, because if I lower the revenue target or the number of customers, I can make it easier on me for CVR. I can make it easier on me for the organic posting that I would need to do. Or, you know what, I really think I could do more than this. Actually, that doesn't sound too hard. If I build my skill up really well and make it, instead of $1,000 price point, it's $1,200 price point, because the higher price point, I can actually afford a lower CVR tolerance, which means I don't have to work as hard on the organic posting, but I just have to work harder on my skill, which becomes an asset. So that actually is easier to grow my company just by becoming really, really good at what I'm doing. It's one of the easiest ways of growing your company, as opposed to all the operations that have to make up for a lack of skill. So you can really quickly be like, so wait, I get to be really passionate about what I love to do, and I don't have to work a lot of hours because I just calculated how many hours I have to work, and I'm going to make that $20 million exit, or $200,000 a year, which is great. This I think is what can make people see, like, it's actually a lot more feasible to run a company when you know how to do this 5-minute kind of calculation for yourself, and know that no other advisor's advice is really going to change your calculation. It's going to intersect with your calculation, but it's not going to change your own calculation. And you don't need some sort of a sophisticated math model or some crazy business advisor to tell you if this is viable or not.
Amazing. Amazing. That's it exactly. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for breaking that down for us. I suspect a lot of
Mm,
people are going to. Sorry, Zishan, do you have a?
can I ask one question? Yeah, I have been just
Yeah,
listening to Germany. Germany, first of all, it's been so amazing, like getting this useful insights from your side and getting into having a deep dive of how the sales actually works. So I have a very, you can say, an important question, as I belongs to a company that manufactures airbag jackets. So we are primarily doing a manufacturing part, and as in your insights you have just shared a couple of some strategies which have been a part, like how we can tackle the people who are looking the product for the free. The second one are the people who are looking with the product which makes them happier in terms of discount, and the third one where we can add more discounts, more where we can add more specification, we can add some more selling features in our product to make it a premium sale, to do some premium sales. How this strategy actually works in a company where there is only one product which only wholly purpose is to protect the human life. How we can, because we cannot reduce the price, we don't have that mileage to come up with more features, with more you can say, as we have more mileage of getting new features in tech based company, how we can do that for the hardware product, primarily for the safety sector product, safety equipment product.
And your question is how to grow the company, or did you have a more specific question about a particular part of it?
Yeah, that's how we can grow the company. Like in tech base, we can do some discounts, we can do some freemium model, we can do some add features and selling it out in a good price for the people who are our in our bucket list of like $100 million, as you said. So my question is, with the same constant price of a product, how we can go for the 3,000 to 10,000 and then getting it to $1 million company? How hardware company can do that
Yeah. So
on the
this
same
applies.
price? Yeah.
Yeah, so this applies to hardware, software, farming, clothing, SaaS. I've applied it to a lot of companies because it's mathematics, company science, and people science. It's not product specific. It's not service specific. It meshes, it forms to that, right? So your price point, we don't want to focus on discounts. That was just an example of like happiness versus word precision, general words versus word precision. We don't want to focus on, we don't really want to do discounts too much, if at all. Depending, some people do it. That's a whole other discussion. You have your price point. If you want to, you want to run the calculation. The answer is you want to run the calculation because it's going to be specific to your company. If you're selling your thing for $50, and your customer acquisition is $30, that's not, you know, you might want to look at trying to say, how can I bump up AOV, or how can I increase the messaging quality, simplicity,
Hmm.
desire language, because that's going to lower the $30 CAC, right? So it's like, I wouldn't, if you ask a general question to me or any advisor or anyone, you're going to get a general answer and it's going to be wrong. We want to either ask specific questions, or somebody like me is going to respond and say, we want to do calculated decisions. So to answer what the next growth step for you would require me to know, and we don't have to cover it. We don't want to cover that on a recorded call necessarily, but you would want to think about, if your CAC is at some point, well, if you're at the lowest of CACs, you can't really lower that one lower. But if you're at a $300 CAC for a consumer good, you probably can drop that down to a $50 CAC, and that means your messaging is one of the first areas to dive into. But if you're already a $50 CAC and that's the average CAC for that space, we're not going to try to dive into that one first, right? So it depends on where your number is, based on where we would dive in first. And once your CAC is your ideal and your messaging is ideal, sometimes it's about getting that message more visibility. Sometimes you have to hack and get that message visibility in organic ways up to a certain point of getting enough money to where you can spin off paid ads. And spinning off paid ads is once you have enough money above your baseline bills. Okay, well then can I lower my baseline company operation bills to where then I can actually spin into that? So it would be a calculation.
Yeah, great, great. I would love to share my numbers with you, and definitely your expertise and your experience and your exposure is so vast, what you can say, and so big. So thank you very much for taking out your time. And so it was very, very interactive session with Jeremy Barr. Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
Okay, Jeremy. I think on that note, officially want to thank you for truly being an amazing advisor to PTH, and I'm looking forward to more of our founders getting to interact with you and take away these lessons. Thank you again for being so awesome and for sharing your knowledge and your expertise so openly. It's not something that we take for granted. So thank you again.
Thank you, Omar. It's an honor to be here and an honor to always be doing things with you.
Thank you. We'll talk soon, Jeremy. Bye for now.
Thank you all.